What's up, Logan? So just a real quick video on domain and range based upon the graph of the function and what is it? All right, so first thing is understanding what's the definition of domain. Domain is just the x values of the graph, right? So the x values for our graph. So that's what you're going to be looking for, the x values of the graph. All right, next question is what's range? Range is the same thing, except instead of saying x values, it's the y values. It's the y values. The y values, let me change that, y values of the graph. Okay, so let's take a look at we call this a discrete problem, right? A discrete problem. So I'm going to put just a couple of points up here, and I just want to know what's the domain? What's the domain, all right? So we'll start off with this point here. Let's put this point here, and let's put this point here, okay? So this is actually a really small domain compared to what you guys are going to be analyzing, primarily because it's finite. There are actually only 3 answers for the domain, and there's only 3 answers for the range. So the way we have to do it is first is what's the domain? So the domain are all the x values. So I look at these points. This point right here has an x value of -5. So I would say that this one here has an x value of -5. So my domain is -5, comma. This one has a x value of -3, so -3. And then this one has an x value of 2. So I would say that the domain, based on what you see here, is -5, -3, and 2. Now, do the same exact thing for range. Range of the y values. So this one over here has a y value of -3. Right? Notice I'm going to the y-axis. So when I look for my domain, I go to the x-axis. When I look for my range, I go to the y-axis. So my range for this function is going to be -3, comma, right? This point over here goes to 1, right? So this has a y value of 1. So we're going to say 1. And this last one has a y value of +3. So our domain is going to be -3, 1, and 3. And that's domain and range, right? Now, we're going to take this and we're going to advance this idea just a bit. All right, so we're going to advance it a bit. Let me paste that. There we go. All right, let's try another one. So this time, rather than doing a discrete set of points, how about we do a continuous set of points? So let's try something a little different. All right, so this is what we're going to do is I'm going to draw a line. I'm going to draw a line from this point right here all the way to this point right there. Okay, so I'm going to draw a line from that point to that point. So let me do that in black. My mistake. Let's do that in black. So we're going to go from this point here to this point right there. Let's give it this dot over here and this dot over here. Okay, so we start off with domain. Now here's the big problem. Here's the big problem is that, you know, the domain, so it goes -4, but then there's also a point there. Right, and there's a point there, and there's a point there, and there's a point there, and there's a point there. So you're noticing that right now it's all the numbers from -4, and it keeps going, right? Now I'm going to start skipping over all the way over here, and it keeps going all the way to +4. So we would say that our domain for this problem is between -4 and +4. So you'd write between -4 and 4. Okay, but that's not how we write it mathematically. So mathematically, we would say that the domain, notice I write the letter D, the domain is from -4 to 4. And since we're talking about the variable x, we'll say x. So that's what we would say. X is between -4 and 4. And the way we would write it is -4 is less than x, less than or equal to, and is less than or equal to 4. Or the domain is all the numbers bigger than 4 and bigger than -4, sorry, and smaller than +4. That's what the domain is. Now, the range, you do something very similar, except you have to go to the y-axis. So we're like, all right, so to there, to there. So you're like, oh, all these points, right? But then don't forget, you also have to have these points, right? So then all these points over here as well are going to the y-axis, right? So then we can see that our range is between this point, right, all the way up to over here, because it goes from +1 to 4. So we would say that our range is between 1 and 4. Between 1 and, oh, not x. What variable should it be, right? Because it's going up and that's the range, the y values, right? Like that. And that right there is how I would set up the range for something like this. Okay, we're going to do one more example. This last example is actually more like the homework. Okay, so more like the homework. The homework tonight, all I really care about is your ability to find the domain, find the domain. But we'll also look for the range on this one as well. Okay, so we'll do both of them. All right, so we're going to start off with our graph. I'm going to randomly do a graph. Now we're working on radical functions, and this is what a radical, the square root function to be more specific, looks like. So we got a point right there, and then there's another point right there, and then another point right there, okay? And then you would connect it, and you'd have something that kind of looks like this. And it goes on forever. All right, so question is, what's the domain? So to find the domain, we would want to say that's all the x values. So we say, okay, so the domain, that's the x value, -4, -3.5, -3, -2.5, -2, -1. Right, so all of these values are represented with this graph up here, right? They all map, right? They all map onto the x-axis, and they don't stop. They keep going. They keep going. So what we're looking for are all the x values that are bigger than -4. So our answer for the domain are all the x values that are bigger than -4. All the x values bigger than -4. And that's what your homework's going to be like tonight, okay? Now, I'm going to add one last thing, which is not on the homework, and this is the range. So how would you find the range? Well, we have to find the y's. So you notice that this one here maps onto 3, bigger than 3, 4, bigger than 4, right? So it's mapping all these, and then these guys map here, still bigger than 4, right? It's still bigger than 4. Now, here's where it gets really weird, is you'll notice that this is going up forever, right? So it actually is going to keep mapping all the way here, which tells you that your range is everything bigger than 3. Everything bigger than 3, because they all map to, the first point maps to 3, and then everything else, right? These guys here are from this, and then up here is from over here, and this keeps going, so it's going to keep going up. So we're going to say that it's all of these numbers from 3 all the way up to infinity, essentially. So we're going to say that our range are all the y values that are bigger than 3, okay? And this is not on your homework, but this is something that we will be focusing on the next section, all right? The next topic. All right, if you have any questions, send me an email, and I'll be sure to get back at you. Talk to you guys later.